Good afternoon, everyone. Before we officially begin, as indicated in the registration for this gathering, by attending the Zoom webinar, you acknowledge that this session will be recorded and may be used for future presentations of the University of Arizona Global Campus, or UAGC. Welcome. We know you have many choices when selecting your professional development activities, and there are some amazing opportunities here at the University of Arizona Global Campus and beyond. We are happy that you chose to join us today as the UAGC Department of Education and Liberal Arts proudly presents to you Ed Talks. I'm Dr. Jessie Upshaw, and I'm honored to lead the Professional Development Committee of the Department of Education and Liberal Arts here in the UAGC College of Arts and Sciences. I'll be your host this afternoon. For those of you that are new to Ed Talks, this is not your traditional professional development webinar. Ed Talks are fashioned after TED Talks, the ever-popular way of sharing concepts through personal storytelling. The 2022 Ed Talks series is entitled The Power of One, Empower Our Students, which provides a foundation in the online higher education environment to develop and foster the power of meeting students where they are in their classrooms through course design, instruction, and interactions with students to support skills that can transcend the higher education classroom and stay with them after they have met their goals. Today's session is entitled Equitable Access to Mastery, How to Be a Bad Teacher. Dr. Newton Miller is here with us to explore and extend the UAGC's culture of care and power of one with his story, inspired by adopting good teaching practices that lay the foundation for equitable access to mastery and empowering our students. As you listen to Newton's story, you might listen for your call to action to share your practices that support a culture of care and empowerment in your classroom and interactions with students and colleagues. Or perhaps you'll find a new practice that his story or our discussion sparks for you. Dr. Miller, will you come on camera and say hello as I introduce you?
Hello, everyone, and I appreciate you taking some time out to spend some time with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Dr. Newton Miller has been committed to the education arena since 1995, when he converted non-traditionally from the ranks of the engineering field. His research interest lies within educating at potential populations, focusing on the systemic thinking tied to student achievement, effective school cultures, and facilitating programming and instruction that promotes educational success within at potential adult populations. Dr. Miller currently serves as the lead faculty of the Education Studies and Educator Preparation programs at the University of Arizona Global Campus. Some of his contributions to the world of education have been lauded by honors, like the Impact Award from the Urban League in 2018, Provost Award for Outstanding Faculty from Ashford University in 2014, and the Excellence in Teaching Award from Swarthmore College in 2012. He is the author of Why Some Seeds Don't Grow, write that one down, a book that sheds light on the high impact principles needed to enhance the educating, mentoring, and parenting of urban youth. Dr. Miller believes educators are meant to facilitate the thinking that changes the world. Thus, his mantra is educate, motivate, and help them grow. A fun fact about Dr. Miller is his dream job was a structural engineer until he stood in front of a classroom of knowledge-hungry inner city students. It was at that moment he knew his true purpose and career path was to be an educator. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Miller.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Newton, I'm now going to ask that we remove our videos so we can get started after I provide a few reminders. As a reminder, Ed Talks are fashioned after TED Talks, the ever-popular way of sharing personal stories for only 18 minutes of monologue. We do this because we want to hear your stories, and we can best do that by sharing our stories. Our goal here is not necessarily to teach you anything new, as you are already an expert in your field. Our goal is to perhaps motivate you to try something new in your approach to helping your students succeed. Our storytelling approach is geared to not take a lot of your time, but rather to simply set the stage for an interactive conversation and perhaps encourage you to encourage your students in some new way. At the end of our Ed Talk today, we look forward to hearing your story of what you are doing or will do in your classroom or educational setting. After Dr. Miller's story, we will invite all participants to share your reflection and your practices. So with that said, audience members, if you could please hold your comments and chat until the end as we listen to Newton's story. Let's get started. Dr. Miller, the microphone is yours.
Well, as we go through our talk today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to put 3 questions on the board, like for you to kind of think about them as we go along. But for what I really want to do is I want to talk to you about the power of a coffee can. And to do that, I want to tell you about a young lady that grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, back in the 1930s. She lived on an old dirt road in the country. Her family grew most of their own food, and they worked at the families of white folks that lived around them to clean and to do their laundry. She didn't even have running water until her mid-20s. She always dreamed about leaving that country road. And as fate would have it, she met a young Navy man from Durham, North Carolina. They got married and moved up north to start a better life. Now, see, from high school, she was in the business track. So she had some basic accounting and some shorthand under her belt. So she was able to land a really good job at one of the country's oldest historically Black colleges and universities, Cheney University of Pennsylvania. Now, when she got hired, it was registration time. So in order for her to help with registration, they paired her with the basketball coach, just to support her. Now, the basketball coach, he was a tall, well-dressed Black man, but he was a coach at heart, meaning the way he talked, he used his hands and his voice and his facial expressions. I mean, you never had to guess whether he agreed or disagreed with whatever was going on around him. Now, if you ever been to a registration day on the HBCU, it's kind of like a celebration. Everyone's seeing each other for the first time in a while. But there was a young man standing in coach's line, but he wasn't doing anything. He was just kind of looking around, not talking to anyone or anything. And that was okay. But what was strange about it is that he was holding a coffee can. Well, it came his turn in line. He came up to the table and he peeled the top off the coffee can and he poured the contents of the coffee can out on the table. It was a bunch of change and rolled up dollar bills and things of that sort. Well, coach, man, he hit the ceiling. What in the world is this? Man, you don't come to a place like this bringing no change and balled up dollar bills, boy. You don't have a bank account? Well, if you don't have a bank account, I know you got a corner store in your neighborhood. You could have got a money order. You see, that's why they talk about us. This right here. This is why they can't take us anywhere. I'm not counting this money. Man, you better go get yourself a money order and come back another day. And with that, the coach kind of walked away, still mumbling under his breath. The young man started scraping his change back up into the coffee can and turned to walk away. Well, just about that time, the young lady who witnessed the whole thing, she finished serving the students she had, and she said, young man with the coffee can. Well, he turned and she motioned for him to come back to her, and he did. And when he got close to her, she looked in his eyes and then looked at the can and then looked back in his eyes and said, I'll help you count what's in your can. Well, as they were counting the money, they conversated, and she found out that he was from North Philadelphia. And the only reason he was there is because his buddy had got recruited to play football, and he kept saying, man, you got to come see what college is about. So he worked odd jobs and saved all his money, and that was what was in the can, hoping he could pay for at least a semester to see what this college thing was all about. Well, just about that time, they finished counting the money, and guess what? He didn't have enough. But the young lady never told him that. In fact, she gave him back $15 and said, hey, you got enough to buy a 30-day transfer pass to the SEPTA line. That should help you get from North Philly to campus every day. Now, there's one last step to your registration after you get your courses today. Monday, I need you to come see me before you start your courses. Now, he didn't know that was strange, never been to college, so he came to her office Monday morning. By the time he got there, she had already called the ACT 101 program. Now, that's a summer transition program for at potential students, right? And she wanted to see that they have any extra backpacks and school supplies and book vouchers and bus passes. Then she called the financial aid office and the housing office and set up appointments for him to meet with them because he didn't know what services were offered, hoping if he went there, he wouldn't just go for a semester, but he would be able to finish his whole college experience. Well, when he got to the office, she handed him the sheet of paper and told him what to do. And guess what? He did it. So as with most first-generation college students, along his tenure, he met some rough times academically, socially, and emotionally. And every time he met a hard time, he would come back and see that young lady and mask that hard time by saying, Do you need any help in the office? Well, they both knew that he came to visit her because she was the first face of kindness and concern, that she went first to show belief in him and to do something to help him fit in and be successful and realize his goal of reaching a college degree. So I guess in some way, she was like maybe a lifeline or something to the student. Well, fast forward a few years in his graduation day. He was mad excited, man. He's running all over the campus trying to find her, and he does. He finds that young lady, and guess what he does? He hands her that coffee can. And he said, I'm giving you this coffee can because remember that day on registration when coach wouldn't help me? Man, I had already made up my mind. I'm leaving this campus. I ain't never coming back to college. These people don't want me here, and I don't want to be here with these people. But you stopped me, and you said, I'll help you count what's in your can. Now, I didn't know it then, but I know it now. Those 8 words changed my life forever. So I'm giving you this can back. So when you see another student like me, please be willing to count what's in their can too. And with that, he gave her a hug and walked away. Now, I know we're all educators here on this Ed Talk, and I'm supposed to be talking about examples of stories that were research proven and research-based techniques that we could use to, put inside of our instructional design and instructional delivery process. And you're probably saying, Miller, this lady's not a teacher. It's nothing research-based or research proven here. Now, if I was in the room with you, I'd look you straight in your eyes and tell you that you're dead wrong. This lady was and is an educator. Matter of fact, the best type of educator. She was able to lay down some criteria and see the demonstration of the mastery of the results that she wanted from her student without ever walking in the classroom. You see, an educator, that's someone who facilitates the process so that a human being can, be cultivated from one state of being to another that helps them to operate in a way so they can release their potential into our society. And that's exactly what that lady did. You see, she realized that all it takes to help a person is to just be willing to help them right then, right there, when you see the need. You see, this lady was culturally responsive. She had just come from the country. She was immersed into the city culture where it was the standard operating procedure for everyone else around her. So she knew what it was to feel like you were always one step behind. So when she saw that young man out of place, she recognized an opportunity to meet a need in another human being's life. She didn't need to know him. She didn't need to know what was going on. She didn't need any data from Signals to find out what happened in his courses before and whether he was an achiever or a striver or whatever words it is that we call him. She didn't need to know why he had a coffee can. All she needed to know was that he had a need and that she could meet that need right then, and it could change his life. Now, I've had some coffee can experiences in my life, and I'm sure you have too. Like I remember in 10th grade, Mr. Socha, I was a troublemaker, but he went first to build his own opinion of me. He made a relationship with me. Matter of fact, he's the one that showed me that I was pretty good at math. And he's the one that broke that inertia in my life so I would go after bigger and better things after high school. Or there was Frank Wells from Prime, the Philadelphia Regional Introduction to Minorities to Engineering. This gentleman walked me across Villanova University's campus into the office of the dean of the College of Engineering and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Sir, this is the young man I was talking about. This is Newton Miller. He has what it takes to go the distance." Well, when I kind of turned and looked at him in bewilderment, like you talking about me, he looked me in my eyes and refused to look away and said, "Like I said, this is Newton Miller. This young man has what it takes to go the distance." And he stared at me for what seemed like an hour. See, he wanted me to know and sear into my mind, burn into my brain that I had potential and that I could achieve something. He wanted me to know that he meant what he was saying. Then there was that time that my dad stopped to help that white lady and her children on that dark highway when we were heading to North Carolina that night. Despite the fact that my mom was in tears, begging him, "Please don't stop. Just keep going. Somebody else will help her." Now I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I didn't know why it was such a big deal till we got to the family reunion, and my mom told my dad's 6 older brothers on him, and they all got in the room and got on his case. "Boy, Do you know what you were doing? Man, the police could have came by, somebody else could have came by, you could have been locked up, you could have been lynched, you could have been beaten, you put your family in danger. You forget where you were, this the South, boy, this ain't the North. Well, just about that time, my oldest uncle, Uncle Roger, I guess he had enough. He got up and he walked across the room, put his hand on my dad's head. He had an afro, kind of like, you do like a little kid, like rub their head to mess up their hair. He did that to my dad and he said, baby brother, I'm not surprised. You did what you always do, the next right thing. You see, what I'm trying to say to you is I had tons of good examples, whether they were educators, whether it was family, or whether it was mentors. But the one thing that seemed they all had in common was that they all delighted in simply doing the next right thing just because it was the right thing to do. I mean, they weren't looking for no accolades or no fanfare. They weren't counting likes or views. They weren't saving end-of-course survey studies and comments and student emails to brag about what they've done. They were just genuinely fulfilled and happy with life as they took pride in doing what they did best, and that was helping people that needed them. Now, I'm going to keep it real with you, though. I ain't always have a coffee can experience with all my teachers. I mean, the 5th grade, Mrs. Brennan, she told me, well, it's okay. Black kids don't usually do well in multiplication. And you probably won't need them for whatever job you get when you're an adult. And then Mrs. Donnelly, the guidance counselor, she came to me and brought me the fabulous news that I had gotten a scholarship, but in the same breath said, well, you probably won't do well. I mean, it's an accelerated program. And Newton, you're just not college material. And then there was Dr. Peterson. He was a college professor. He taught abstract algebra. Now I got a 97 or above on everything that he had. You know how back then you're supposed to keep all your tests and all your assignments. I had them all, but I got a C- in the class. So when I went to him to find out why, he said, well, you didn't buy the textbook, right? It was required in the syllabus. I said, well, sir, I really couldn't afford the textbook. And he said, well, I guess all you could afford was a C- in this class then. Then there was Mrs. Hall, not my teacher, but my youngest son's senior year high school teacher. And she refused to let him even step foot inside the classroom the whole 4th quarter of his senior year. Now, I didn't know any of this until about 2 years after he had graduated from high school. But when I finally found out, I asked him why. And he said, well, they had a heated debate in class one day about which tragedy was worse, slavery or the Holocaust. Him being a young Black man, he had one opinion. Her being a Jewish female, she had another opinion. And that's how that bad teacher decided to handle that situation. Now, just like all the good educators I told you about whose paths I crossed, it all had something good in common. Well, guess what? All these bad teachers had something in common too. They seemed stressed. I don't know what about, I guess just life. I mean, as an educator myself now, looking back, I often wondered, why they even stay in the field? They were hurting people. Why didn't they just quit? It seemed like they didn't like us. They didn't want to help us and could care less what happened to us. I mean, it was clear that they were just simply miserable. It's a whole lot harder to be a bad teacher than it is to be a good educator. Fast forward some years, the joke was on me, right? I'm saying God has a sense of humor. I needed a job, and the quickest and most available one to me was teaching math in Philadelphia. Now, I'm finding myself standing in front of this classroom full of urban students who were from neighborhoods like mine and looked like me. And I didn't even want to be a teacher. It was supposed to be just temporary, right? But I hated school. I mean, I still hate school. I love education, but I hated school. But when I looked in their eyes, I saw they needed me. So I knew I was in the right place at the right time. And I knew it was my purpose to be here. I understood what my father felt on that dark highway that night. I felt compelled to do the next right thing. But I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm gonna keep it real. I struggled. I mean, I was shook. I was scared down to my socks. I didn't know, was I gonna be a Brennan? Was I gonna turn out to be a Donnelly or a Peterson? Was I going to be a Hall? Was I going to keep perpetuating this cycle of mental oppression and microaggressions and culture of accepted bias and stereotypical negative expectations going on in their lives? Was I going to ignorantly use my position as a teacher to pour out a paralyzing poison into the minds of these youngsters whose lives were already being lived in a war zone? Or was I going to be that one that sowed some seeds of hope, some seeds of possibility into those youngsters so they could do all they could do and be all they could be? Well, I decided to take the easy way out, y'all, and just do the next right thing. I refused to be a bad teacher. And I decided to commit to the lifelong journey of being a good educator. Now, like I said, it's a whole lot easier to be a good educator than it is to be a bad teacher. Now, over the years, there's one thing I learned, that to be a good teacher, it's my responsibility to go first for my students. So as a result, here in UAGC, I put accommodation packages in place. So when students get to my class, they already have what I call 8 to be great. The relaxed deadlines are in play to give them time to submit quality work and not just on-time work. I give them expedited access to me. I say, listen, text me, call me, email me, inbox me as soon as you need me, as often as you need me. After all, I work for you. I mean, I understand that I need to humble myself and realize I'm not that important. They have a whole lot of things going on in their life. And when I'm looking at my class, it is like low on their list of priorities. So you know what I do? I put techniques and methods in place so I can differentiate instruction and ensure that they all have equitable access to mastery. And I do that by providing exemplary examples for every assignment and project. I do what I call I, not F. That's when I refuse to grade something if it's under par. I just give them formative feedback. And I say, listen, this is not incomplete. This is incomplete. It's not failing. So once you resubmit it, text me so I can change your grade. Now, let me take you guys back a little bit in history. Remember in the old COE, the College of Education, when Tony started up what we call the Save One campaign? Well, it's now morphed here at UAGC into Power of One. And even better, I love this term. I'm a whole lot of complexity to it. The culture of care. That sounds marvelous, doesn't it? It's as if we've had this great revelation and suddenly we're doing this new and wonderful favor and service for our students. Well, whether you call it Save One, Power of One, or Culture of Care, I'm telling you, it's our reasonable service. It's what we're supposed to do. It's simply doing the next right thing. Now, I know you don't want to hear that. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to finish the story about the coffee can. When I was a principal in the middle school, right, I used to go talk to all of the businesses around me and have them come in and share some time with our students so our students can know what possibilities they had after they finished school. Well, one time, the owner of a minority-owned financial advising company that was doing really well in the city called me and said, hey, can I work with your students? Well, of course you can come work with my students when you want to come. Well, he came, and after he finished it, I gave him a school shirt, I think it was, like I did most folks. But this time he said, I have something for you, but it's in my car. Can you come out and get it with me? Well, it was wintertime in Philadelphia, and the hawk was out, y'all. I didn't really want to go outside, but out of respect, I did. I followed him to his car, and he reached into the back seat of his car, and he pulled out a coffee can. Now, I was puzzled. I don't drink coffee. The can was empty. So he realized I didn't understand the significance of the coffee can. So he told me the story of the coffee can that I just told you. And he revealed to me that he was the young man holding the can that day. But even more, he said that the young lady who said, I'll help you count what's in that can. Well, that was my mother. So as he handed me the can this time, he put his hands on my shoulders and he looked me straight in my eyes, kind of like Frank Wells did back when I was 17 years old on Villanova's campus. And he said, listen, son, now you're in position to be the counter. And everybody has a coffee can. So you need to be that person that helps them count what's in it because you never know where it's going to take them in life. So all of you listening to this Ed Talk, I'm challenging you today to do as my mother did. Go first for your students, even when they're frustrated, even when it seems like they're about to give up and walk away from this wonderful opportunity to change their life that we call education. You still go first. Do what you got to do. Get their undivided attention. And whatever it looks in this online environment, you look them in their eyes and with no uncertain terms, you tell them, I'll help you count what's in your can. You see, there's bad teachers and they create limits and paralyze the forward progress of creativity and individualism that's in each student. It's like they want the students to conform to policies and procedures that have already been established. It's like they want to make them good at repeating what's already been done. But if you always do what you always did, then you always get what you always got. But educators, on the other hand, man, we're about possibilities. We break the rules, Jack. We can't wait to rip the lid off that can and help our students explore what's inside so they can see their skills and gifts and abilities and synthesize something new and great that can change our society. So I'm telling you, like the coffee can man told me that day on that cold Philadelphia street, each of you are in position to be a counter. Each of your students has a coffee can. So you need to get excited. No. You need to be honored that you are the educator that can help them count what's in their can so they can use that gift to transform our very world. After all, y'all, that's what world changers do. And if no one's ever told you, I'm telling you today, right now, that that's what you are, a world changer. So look your students in the eye. Go first and tell them, I'll help you count what's in your can. I'm Dr. Newton. Hopefully you grab some more so you could take with you to educate yourself, motivate yourself, and help yourself grow. And as usual, my friends, make it a great day or not, because that choice is always going to be yours. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Miller. Your words and the theme of doing the next right thing to teach our students and reach our students, count what's in their can, brings up so many situations and faces and experiences in my mind. And I'm already seeing it in the chat, not only in my own classroom, but throughout my lifetime. The emphasis you made on truly seeing our students and reaching that hand out to pull them over the wall that bad experiences may have built before they entered our virtual classroom door really sticks with me. For those of you that are here today, as we open up our chat lines, please consider your takeaways from this story, and we're going to frame our discussion. What are you currently doing in your practice to support student success? What are you inspired to do next? Newton has posed some questions for us to consider here as we reflect our own practice, looking through that lens of empowering our students. What's in your student's coffee can? What's the next right thing look like for you? And in this online environment, describe how you may have looked one of your students in the eye and told them that you will help them count what's in the can. Please start sharing your impression, your ideas, or perhaps your new approach in the chat. I see some of you already are. Be sure your chat is set to everyone so that we can all see it. And we'd also love to hear from you today. If you'd like to share using your audio, simply raise your hand using the hand icon at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be given the opportunity to unmute your microphone and share your story in reflection that way. We invite you to share the conversation now with your story. One of the first things I saw in here was the messages being culturally responsive and taking the opportunity to meet a need. Some of our attendees are sharing that they've had many coffee can experiences in their personal and professional life, and I feel the same. Newton, you have a message here that you never fail to remind us why we're here. It's a chance for us to recalibrate, and your mother's story gave some chills. Thanks, Jen. Got to scroll through all the accolades here, Dr. Miller. so motivational. Some of our attendees are sharing that your words and examples really pumped them up, feeling bad that you had that experience, but in a way, glad that you did, because now you're so impressive. Look at you now. Dr. Reef shares every student has a coffee can that's built on their prior life experiences. The more we make those experiences count, the better off our students are in the classroom and life. Thank you, Dr. Reef. Dr. Miller Roseanne shares here that every new faculty member and staff member should hear your story. It's a wonderful motivator to explain why being on the team on Team UAGC and the culture of care is so important. And then quotes Maya Angelou, we remember how people made us feel. Dr. Handy shares that just this week, she had a vulnerable conversation with a student and helped her remember why she enrolled. Again, back to that why, and how together we're going to get her across the finish line. So she's counting that coffee can. There's a question for you here, Dr. Miller. What do you do when students don't respond to your help after countless times? Do you just keep reaching out, hoping they will accept the support?
You want me to answer it now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Well, it's kind of two parts to that question. I saw it. It's kind of two parts to the answer, and I'll give you actually another story which kind of sealed it in on me. One part is, do the students really believe you when you say, you know, you're on their side and that you're going to do this or that to help them? Oftentimes they don't, because we don't go first. We wait until they need something, so they're already in trouble. And many of our students, if they're, especially if they're from low income arenas, they're in survival mindset. So once they're in trouble, then walls go up and defense happens. So it's a lot harder to accept help unless it's to their advantage from a vantage point that they want to receive it. So that's one piece to it. The other part to the answer to the question is yes. I keep saying, hey, I keep doing it. I keep sending an email. I keep contacting them. And you know, I try to do it lightly, missing you or something like that. You know, it's not too late. And how I know it works, usually people show up, and they might show up a little later than I want to. But when I really realized, it was one graduation, I don't know if you remember this, but I was helping to hand out degrees. And it was the master's degrees that we were handing out. And there was a African-American gentleman. He kept moving back in line. And I noticed him moving back in line, which I thought was strange, you know, because usually folks want their degree and want to move on, but he wanted to be last. And he got last, and I went to hand him the degree, and this all happened in a matter of seconds. He said, you know, you don't know who I am, do you? And I was like, no. He said, well, I kind of like checked out in your class, like in week 2, and you kept texting me, emailing me, and you kept, inboxing me through the class and saying, you know, you got a plan for me. All I got to do is contact you. So finally one day, I said, well, what can it hurt? And I contacted you, and we came up with something, and look where we're standing. So, you know, I put my arm around him, said, well, let's look at it together. And he went on. Now, he had told me that he didn't think that I really wanted to help him because he didn't think I liked Black men. Long story short, afterwards, I caught up with him and said, what did you mean by that statement? And he said, well, you're a little tougher on us. So I went back and I looked at my stuff in the classroom, like how I responded to the students that I knew were Black men. And I was shorter. I was more abrupt. I was, I kind of held them to a different standard. And I realized that was my own bias, trying to help Black men do better, because I was raised, you know, you got to work twice as hard to get half as far, you know, as a Black man. And I superimposed that on other Black men. So that was a type of bias that I showed. So why am I saying that what I learned from that? I learned that he didn't believe that I really wanted to help him. But the fact that I kept trying, I kept saying, hey, look, you know, call me, hey, text me, email me, I got you, I have your back, I miss you, it's not too late, you know. He finally took the chance, and that chance allowed him to graduate, and I had to pay for a course and take it again. So long answer, but hopefully we hit the point there somewhere else. I don't know, is there anything else, Jesse? I wasn't watching the chat.
No, I'm keeping an eye on it. You're good. Beverly mentions here that students also have expectations and goals in the coffee cans they bring to UAGC, and she does her best to help them fit the coursework in their lives. So that balance that's so important. We do have another question from Margaret. She asks, what might the coffee can represent in the UAGC environment? I'll let you answer that one, Dr. Miller.
Coffee can experience can represent anything in anyone's life. It can represent a divorce. It can represent a child that passed away. It could represent a family member. It can represent an eviction. It can represent, poor reading skills or writing skills. It can represent a low self-esteem, a low self-image. It can represent a bad experience with educators before. It could represent a tough marriage, an abusive relationship. It can represent tons of things. We all have coffee cans. I got one. I got a whole bunch of stuff in the coffee can. I've gotten wise enough to kind of know who can help me count certain things in my can, because everyone can't help me count everything, but that's another conversation for another time. But my point is that when we start looking at students with this through these rose-colored glasses to kind of ignore the fact that life has issues, and that, and those issues are going to come first, really, and they're going to impact impede their progress on this path to getting their education. When we forget that as educators, I think we become teachers and not educators. I think we're no longer at that point worried about cultivating the human being so they can get from one phase of life to another phase of life so they can release whatever potential's in them. They don't need teachers anymore. You can go on the internet and learn content. They need educators that can help them facilitate the process, thinking processes, and how do I take this and synthesize and evaluate it and analyze and create something new, not just for me, but for everything around me. So coffee can is everything. It's it's everything.
Everything you bring with you. Thank you, Dr. Miller. Holly, I saw your hand. Did you want to come on and ask something or comment?
Yes, Jessie, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Excellent. Yes, thank you so much for this presentation. I appreciate you keeping it real, Newton. I'd like to have replied to the third question on the slide. At the beginning of this session, I may invite students to make an appointment to share virtual afternoon tea with me in week 1 of the class. And some students will take me up on it. In a recent call, which we met on Zoom, so we're able to see each other and hear each other, a student expressed anxiety about being able to do the serious science required for one of the 2 career paths the student was considering. This student appeared to be female and appeared to be an African-American student dressed in full military gear in the office while we were speaking. And I was able to provide encouragement face-to-face and say, well, what makes you think you wouldn't be able to do it? And from the student's facial expression, it revealed this aha moment. Yeah, why couldn't I do it? And then she paused and said, thanks for the encouragement. So that is an example of one of those face-to-face moments.
Love that. Holly always motivates me. She always has good stuff to say. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Newton.
Thank you, Holly. Shawanda mentions in the chat, year 22 of teaching college students, it's easy to lose sight of why we do what we do, and to find that passion and joy you once had. And she says, Dr. Miller, your presentation helped her to remember why she's continued to work in this profession. So that's always a lovely motivator to re-listen to your story and see where it applies to our own lives.
Yeah. So I'm reading Allison Reef's comment, and I kind of figured that would come out because I knew that would be a touchy spot for folks because we get defensive about things that we stand behind. I stand behind Power One. I stand behind Culture Care, and what was the first one called? What did Tony call it? I forget. Save One. I mean, I stand behind them. I think it's a way of life. I think that's what educators are supposed to do. What I wanted to pull out was not the mechanisms of the proposal of the thing, the outline of the thing. And I think that's where we get messed up as educators. We get focused in that stuff, and the students don't even care about those things. That's not even in the students' radar. The students' radar is, how do I get from A to Z, and what can you do to help me? And I think we put these systems in place And we as administrators and faculty members, we focus on the mechanisms, thinking we're doing a great thing, but it's really just the right thing to do. So when we start comparing them and saying it's different and it's that and it's different and it's that, I get a chance to speak at a lot of different universities and community colleges, and it's a lot of folks doing some of the same things we're doing, because people are realizing now that this is just what needs to get done. So thank you for the comment, but I really want people to hone in on this is just the right thing to do. It's just the right thing to do. My kids need shoes, so it's right for me to buy them. No one's going to really be like, you're a great dad because your kids have shoes. You're a great teacher because your students are succeeding. So I think when we talk about mindset, the mindset should be along those lines. Not that we're doing this thing, but what's happening with our students? How are we connecting? How are we making sure that they have equitable access to mastery, and we're seeing that mastery take place?
So many things to go through here in the chat, so many wonderful pieces to capture. And I think we're going to have to end it on that wonderful note. Dr. Miller, thank you so much for sharing that, because as all good things must come to an end, we are coming to the end of our time, but we are capturing all these comments and shared practices in the chat. So I hope that you have a chance to come back and revisit Dr. Miller's talk and continue to reflect and discuss. And for those of you who are with us here at UAGC in our Culture of Care conversations, let's keep this conversation going there. But as I said, all good things must come to an end. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and share in the chat the link if you would like a participation certificate. You will also find the recordings of our Ed Talks there. They are archived for future viewing. And for those of you on mobile devices today or watching the recording, you'll also find the link to the recordings and the certificates of the Ed Talks homepage on screen in today's presentation invitation. But before we let you go, we want to acknowledge the work of Dr. Donna Beagle of Communications Across Barriers, as well as the members of the UAGC community for their dedication to the work of the Power of One and UAGC's Culture of Care. Please do mark your calendars for every third Thursday, same time, same place, to continue our series and discussion. Next up, please come back and see us for the next session in September as Dr. Lauren Gonzalez brings us the story of One Small Act, which will be hosted by our very own Dr. Jackie Kiger. We thank you so much for joining us today, and a huge thank you again to Dr. Newton Miller for sharing with us today to inspire our next steps in supporting our students and each other. On behalf of the department chair, Dr. Denise Maxwell, and UAGC's College of Arts and Sciences Department of Education and Liberal Arts, we wish you a safe, healthy, and impactful August, and we will see you next month. Thank you all so much.